Hello, people. Today I want to talk to you about the Pamalogy Society, what it is, and some long-standing visions that I've had. I'm going to say for the past 40 years growing, and 15 years, particularly the past 15 years of my life has changed quite a bit. And what my future holds in terms of my vision for the rest of my life. A lot of you know that I've been involved with something I call the Ragadana Project, and that I've been involved in something called Psalm Walk. That, as I see it, I want to give you the big picture today, and I want to talk to you about mainly not about that at all, but about something called the VOIS products lineup that I had, and about how this week I put out a fleece. If you're not familiar with a fleece, it's what Gideon did in order to figure out what God was saying to him when he was a little confused. Wasn't sure if he was hearing from the Lord, or maybe it was some sort of angel or demon trying to trick him into doing something really foolish. And when you make business decisions, you do want to make sure that if something wonderful might come of it, that you're not being tricked, and that you're not going to take a risk that you shouldn't take. Business is inherently risky. Entrepreneurs are well aware of this. You tend to lose more often than you win. Your success to failure ratio doesn't always have to do with how intelligent you are. You can have bad luck. I've seen this happen before. It happened to my father. He was not a stupid person, but he did lose his money, and he had some bad luck. And I can tell you, no one could have anticipated that suddenly the price of oil was going to shoot up in the 1970s the way that it did. Not only did that affect the sale of his products, but that affected the cost of his manufacturing and destroyed his profit margin, because his products were made out of polyurethane. Well, that's another story. But it happens to people, and with me, since I didn't fall too far away, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, they say. I loved my father, and I've always respected my father despite his failure. And it put me at a disadvantage not having a lot of money to get my own dreams put to life, to realize them. And in fact, my life is a story of being a serial entrepreneur who's failed in practically everything that he's attempted. And it's a very frustrating life to have so many deep and broad aspirations and yet not be able to do anything. Well, this gets us to the essence of the Pamalogy Society, which if I ever accomplish anything in my life, it's all about the Pamalogy Society. Some people may not realize that because they see me doing other things. And the reason being is that I wanted one successful project to start the Pamalogy Society with. And I want to talk to you about the Pamalogy Society today, what it is, why it is that it's so important to me, that I would say that that's the one project that defines my whole life. My whole dream has always centered around this. Okay, so I had put together a podcast a few years ago for it, naively thinking that if I built it, some people would come. And I did want to establish what it was, So I felt that, so I did it for 1 year. I think I put together 24 podcasts and did it bi-weekly for a year. And then I stopped. And the reason I stopped was there was no traffic coming to the podcast. And because I was not spending money or time marketing it. And I realized that if a podcast was going to be successful, that I would need to have other people involved. It shouldn't be a solo podcast, for one thing. And also, I made the mistake of thinking there would be more people in the world of philosophy that would be interested in it, since Pamalogy is essentially a philosophical system that was born of my thoughts about what the purpose of life is and what the cause of life is. And people when it comes to philosophy already have a philosophy, and they tend to be antagonistic towards any other idea that they don't understand to be their own. So that's how they are with religion, and they are with philosophy as well. And people who are religious have attitudes about philosophy, and they want to base their way of thinking on scripture and the traditions that they've learned, rather than on a system of reasoning, which is what Pamalogy is built on. It's not based on the scriptures. It's based on pure reason. So I'm not going to go into what that is in terms of a philosophical system, other than to say that I had put a lot of thought into it, and I had made various conclusions about what pure reason should dictate, and that overflowed when and there were two sides to it. There was the metaphysical side of it. It's basically that answers questions like, is there a God? And if so, what kind of God is there? All based on pure reason. And that's the metaphysical side of it. But there was also a practical side of it, which had to do, well, what does that mean for us? How should we live? What should we do? Can we develop a moral system from this, a way of living? What sort of mottos should there be to live by for individuals and for groups, for countries, etc.? All of that. So that I would another word for Pamalogy is awesomeology. So I don't want you to be left untold exactly what sort of philosophy this was. It was an exceedingly positive philosophy about why we're here. And awesomeology was the assumption that if we're here for a reason, and in that reason, ultimately, there may be a very awesome reason why we're here. And that, so it's a theistic philosophy. In other words, I had based on pure reason that God is true and that God is real and that God is maximized awesomeness. Okay, so awesomeology is another word for theology in that system. And of pure reason. It's not based on scripture, it's based on pure reason. So if God is maximized awesomeness, and we're made in the divine image, which would be normal for a creation that is part of the maximization of awesomeness, that we should be made in that image and that we can maximize our awesomeness, then that lends itself to the question of what is the way that we should be living in order to maximize our awesomeness and take advantage of that. Okay, so that's a summary. And then in season 2 of the podcast, what I had wanted to do was to call that one Applied Awesomology. Now, Pamalogy is an acronym, and it stands for Polyastronomically Maximized Awesomology. So awesomology is a part of the name. If you take that long word backwards, starting with awesomology, it's maximized awesomology. In other words, God is the most awesome that there could be. And polyastronomical means many universes, many astronomies, many worlds. And so you have the heavens, plural, and you have the earth, but you could also have other planets as well. Technically, logically you could, but how reality is, whether there's a multiverse. So we did explore on the metaphysical side that maximized awesomeness lends itself to the thought that there is probably a multiverse, and that God's glory exists not just in this universe, but in many, many other creations that we can't perceive from this universe. It would follow, anyway, that if God is omnipotent and many good things could happen in other universes, that there should be other universes for those good things to take place in. All right, so enough about the philosophy there. Doesn't sound too biblical talking about a multiverse, and I don't want to dispute it, but that is where pure reason goes. I hope you can appreciate that it's just following logic. Now, I wanted to talk about this fleece that I laid out and what that was about. You lay out a fleece when you're having trouble figuring something out, and you want to know what to do, and you don't want to make a bad investment of your time, your money, your relationships. And I haven't explained, in order to understand what this fleece is about, I need to explain more about the Pamalogy Society. I didn't just want to create a philosophical system. I wanted to create a philosophical society. And in that society, what I had envisioned, and that's why this is the goal of my whole life, was many people contributing to a variety of projects with financial contributions and contributions of talent and time to being able to solve a problem that I know that my father had, that I've had, and that many entrepreneurs had and other visionaries of the world have had, where they couldn't get their projects off the ground. And so we could look at the way things are currently done. If a person has an idea, what they have to do is they have to prove their concept. They do some groundwork, make sure that it's a good idea. And then once they've proven it, especially if they've made some initial sales and that they have some profitable business model or a sustainable nonprofit idea, that they bring it to the people who can help, whether that's to donors or whether that's to angel investors. And the way that things are currently done is they'll take their idea to the Shark Tanks of the world. They'll pitch their idea to potential investors. The investors will then own a large portion of the company before all said and done. Normally, sorry, I'm out of breath. I'm going up a hill and I'm still working on my system here. But my body has some repair work to do after a heart attack. So That's the way things are now. But the way that the Pamalogy Society wants to change that, and the reason that we want to change it, is it really doesn't work, because the vast majority of people with ideas don't get their funding. They don't get their investments because the entrepreneurs or the investors, they call themselves serial entrepreneurs, and what they really are is investors. They'll invest in ideas, and they may assist with the projects that they fund, but mainly you have both passive and active investors. Don't get me wrong, but normally an investor is just a person who puts some money down, and if they'll have input because they want their investments to grow, but it's usually from a distance. And if they're serial, then they've got their money in a lot of different things all at once. The reason that it tends to fail for the entrepreneur wannabes that are just seeking funding, they lack the money to get a business started. So it's hard to pitch to those investors. The only criteria that most investors will have is, what's your team look like? Are they capable of executing this idea successfully and winning the way that you're saying that they can? Are we capable of turning the profit that you say that you can in your pitch? And so their driver is practical for them. It's how much money they can get on the return on their investment. So the reason that fails is there are really so few great ideas that come packed with great teams to execute those ideas with, as well as profitable business models. And I'm going to say maybe 1 in 1,000 great ideas actually doesn't meet those criteria. And so a typical investor is going to have to listen to 1,000 elevator pitches before they sink their money down into it. And since they're weeding through 1,000 ideas and pitches, that means that the time for each one of those pitches is reduced to about the length of a trip in an elevator. It's frustrating for the entrepreneurs and the visionaries that they have to take their probably very elaborate ideas and somehow communicate them to people whose only interest is how much money they can make. Well, the Pamalogy Society's idea of the maximization of awesomeness takes this problem where there are visionaries in the world and fixes that by skirting the angel investor and venture capital and other investor family and friends as well. They count. They may pay more attention and time and have an interest in you personally, but family and friends also are not professional business people for the most part, and that especially on the entrepreneurial side of owning businesses and seeing every aspect of an enterprise and knowing how to help. They may not have the resources to help. So that's a problem for them. And so whether it's family and friends or third-party investors, the existing problem is pretty serious in terms of taking ideas and bringing them to life, making them happen. One idea I have is noise reduction. I would love to be able to stop all of these landscapers. They create eye beauty, but the noise factor is really disturbing. Anywhere I go, I would... Sorry for the interruptions. All right, so getting away from the noisy truck. At least the lawn care blowers aren't blowing right now in this neighborhood anyway. All right, so now it's a little more quiet. Now I go to the noisy streets and across the street and noisy cars. So that's the problem. So here's a solution. The Pamalogy Society is a solution to all of this, because what the goal is number one, let me just add to the problem another aspect of it. And that is when a person has a vision of an enterprise and they would like to see it come to life. When somebody comes along and invests in that company, the decision-making power of the founder is often thwarted. And so the original founder and their concept and their dream with all of its thought-out elaboration that might be quite beautiful it's bought out. And so the founder and the visionary no longer has any decision-making power in the company in many cases. And so I wanted the founders to be able to keep their ideas and keep their companies as they get executed. That was the goal. So what if I told you I had found a way to make that happen? What would the world look like if the visionaries of the world were able to implement their ideas without them being bought out by people who only wanted to turn a profit? That's the essence of what the Pamalogy Society is for. Whether those ideas are for nonprofit organizations or whether they are for-profit organizations doesn't matter. What I wanted to do with Applied Awesomology on the podcast was to bring entrepreneurs together who had these visionary ideas if they were going to have ultimately from the idea itself a very high positive social impact, to take those ideas and crowdsource their teams and crowdfund their operations by asking philanthropists to contribute financially and a constant group of listeners to the podcast who wanted to do some amount of pro bono work towards those projects. Okay, bottom line, that's all it is. So we would interview one visionary entrepreneur after another on the podcast and cultivate an audience of philanthropists and professionals who were capable of executing ideas. Now, typically a professional that's willing to support a team in its beginning will offer a tremendous value in terms of the consultation. Ultimately, it may be a temporary pro bono, limited pro bono relationship that they would have. And what they get out of it is, number one, they're contributors to the society. Number two, they are able to do the wonderful thing of making these operations work. And number three, because it's limited, they can start charging the company ultimately for the services that they're providing. So the what's in it for them is super important. Why should they listen and why should they participate? Well, because they can make money out of it ultimately as a limited pro bono offer that they can put in. And so that then benefits the visionaries that stay in charge, that are dedicated to those ideas, who own the stocks of the company. And the criterion in it all is that those who own the companies, the founders, will remain the owners of the companies. And so we would only interview founders who wanted to keep their ideas through ownership and control, not simply by being dedicated to them. You can't come up with an idea and then abandon the idea. And you can't sell your company once you start it. You have to keep the stock that you have. So there's a criteria that they have to have shares of stock that can be resold only in very limited ways. And that no outside organization is permitted to purchase a majority share of the stock. And that would keep the entrepreneurs in control of their companies. And so if ideas presented on the podcast were filtered so that only those entrepreneurs who had that specific type of agreement preset were to come on, then we could help them. All right. So what would happen is they would submit their ideas to us. We would review them and see if they had a compatible high social impact for the world, and not trying to make money from any of these ideas ourselves, raise money and contribute it to those projects unconditionally, other than these few parameters that exist for every project that gets pitched on the podcast. So that was that idea. Now, at jamescarvin.com, I had personally listed about 30 different projects that I would have sent through this system myself if only the Pamalogy Society had existed. But since there's no such podcast and there's no such organization to assist me in the world at this time, all of those ideas remained on the shelf. But walking in faith, I believed that these visions were from the Lord. Now, it's funny how visions go, and so now I'm going to get to the VOIS technologies and what that's about, okay? So VOIS stands for Voice Operated Integrated Systems. And obviously it's VOIS, it's not VOICE, it's VOIS. And there were several domain names. There's always intellectual property rights involved in starting ideas. One of the first questions any Shark Tank's going to ask is, do you own the copyright, or do you own the patent, or do you own the trademark and the intellectual rights to the use of this name? And so the VOIS technology, I had purchased voicetechnologies.com, voicemax.com, voiceride.com, voicetube.com. And each of these domain names, there were, I think, 7 voice domain names that I had purchased. I'm going to say, let me see, it was in 2015, I believe, that I bought them. Each one of these had a very specific set of visions associated with it. And it was an idea that came originally when I was thinking about making some profit, actually. And because I noticed that there were a lot of Uber rides that I was giving at the time. Got to survive, so I was driving for Uber. And when it first arose, and driving for Uber, and then I'm driving in a college town, and a lot of these college students wanted to sing while I was driving, and it was a lot of fun in a lot of cases. And I thought, hey, it would be nice if you had your own karaoke in the car while we're driving. Why don't you sing into this little iPad that I've got on the seat there? And while you're at it, if you want to surf the web and do other things, I'm going to give you access. And I need to secure these, so I've got a monitoring system to protect it. And then I can sell this to all the thousands and thousands of Uber drivers. And so I'll make some money. And that's where the idea had started. But then it very quickly morphed, because as I looked at it, I had realized that there were other problems, and what you wanted to really do with this was, and I called that originally cabbie cam. It was so we'd have cabbie cams, and the students could videotape themselves as they sang, and then they could upload that very quickly to YouTube. And this is where VoiceTube came around originally. The goal was to create a very easy way to make fun recordings as people were out having fun. That was the original market concept. I saw the demand. What I lacked was the funding to put the technology together and a team of entrepreneurs. I did find an entrepreneur and a programmer to work with who originally agreed, but then he backed out of the project because he realized there were some inherent difficulties in it that had to be overcome. And he was getting other offers, as every single developer I know has ever had. They get multiple offers if they're any good. And so I couldn't compete with that, not having money. I think the first things that always happens, oh, you don't have money, well, I don't want to be on your team. Pretty simple. All right, yeah, we're gonna have to go pitch it, and maybe we'll have money, and then maybe I'll get paid for my work. Well, sorry, I'm out. Happens all the time, story of my life. All right, so let me tell you more about what happened with VOIS and how this developed. So then, realizing that I'm not going to be able to put this together, and since Uber's not really too much of a sustainable way to make a living, I wound up driving a truck for a living for a while, around 2017. So I hit the road, visited every state in an 18-wheeler and such. Well, in every case, I had come across two basic problems. One was tracking mileage, and the other was being able to safely drive. And so being able to have voice commands to my phone while I'm driving was really very important for safety. And unfortunately, the technology wasn't integrated properly to do that. And that's when I came up with the VOIS name. Okay, it was voice operated integrated systems. So they have the same problem in trucks as they do in cars. You can't just talk to your phone and expect it to switch apps on command. You can't talk to it. Siri doesn't understand what you're saying most of the time. And so there were ways to improve all of this. And now we're in the AI age, which means that the ways to improve this are rapidly increasing at an accelerated rate. So I would have to say that talking about voice right now is a really good idea, because there's so much more that can be done. So I'm looking at the time. All right, so that's part of what VOIS was. You can imagine now all these people could upload videos to YouTube. They could switch apps on voice commands and then do specific commands within those apps using voice only. And then to create an integrated system that's working with multiple apps simultaneously. As an example, I use both a car app, the speaker system in my car, and my phone. I've got multiple apps that I'm using simultaneously. My Uber app has alerts and it issues directions, and I find the directions that Uber and Lyft give to be very annoying. That it interferes with the music that I'm listening to when the navigational system, the audio, comes on. That's a problem. And it also adjusts my sound levels. So when it's working with the software that's in the car, and suddenly it makes the volume go down, that's a problem for me. Also, when somebody comes and calls and makes a call to me, whether it's an inbound call or an outbound call I have to make, it's going to interfere with the sound levels of everything else that I have. So when I talk about integration, I'm talking about being able to regulate the sound levels. And it's frustrating when you're trying to listen to a YouTube but you can't hear it. Or, a lot of the sources that I have are from various different apps. If I go to Instagram, TikTok, whatever, it doesn't matter what kind of app that it is, I'm going to want to float around from thing to thing and tell the system where to go. This is what I want. And if it's AI, it can do that for me. If the AI has commands over the technology, as well as not, just doing it all from one app. So it's integrated, you see? So voice-operated integrated systems. VOIS. And then in all of that, there's something else that was frustrating me. That's why I got getavoice.com and voicemax.com. The point of that was the fact that every entrepreneur also needs access to marketing and being able to get their ideas out into the market without spending a fortune on advertising. We're not all influencers. We're not born influencers. We have to have some manner of becoming influencers and some strategy to make that work if we don't already have it. And the way things are presently, unless you're already an influencer, most of the Shark Tank is going to ignore you and they won't invest in your ideas. So volume and scaling up your ideas to reach a whole market and maximize your market was part of that. That's why I had voicemax.com. And of course, my motto is maximizing awesomeness. That's the essence of the Pamalogy Society. So all of these ideas developed, but I had to know whether they were from the Lord, because I can't invest my time and energy into things other than sustaining the domain names that I've purchased by repurchasing and renewing them annually. And year after year goes by, and it's for 7 domains at $15 a pop is what it's been costing me. So if I've had that for 10 years, it's $150 for every domain times 7 domains. You can see I've put in about $1,000 in just maintaining this domain name. I said, well, if I got to retire now. I'm 66, going on 67 years old. I'm going to have to slow down my expenses and plan out my budget, if just in case nothing ever works, to add to my income here. So should I renew these domain names? They came due. They're coming due in 3 more days. I have 3 days to either pay to renew these domain names again or not. So I was like, well, wait a minute. Lord, did you put this together? Everything comes together for a reason. And so I'm going to get to the point here about this fleece and how all this works now that I've described what the Pamalogy Society is supposed to do. It's a funding and crowdsourcing organization through podcasts that we would have and that are planned. I haven't started it yet, but I want to put the Ragadana project and the Psalm Walk project as a funding source for it, so that ultimately this would happen. And that's my vision. And this is the vision now. Now that part I'm already certain that the Lord has given me for other reasons. But these voice domains were sort of added. And when it comes to something that gets added in your life, you have to ask whether this is because God just wants to surprise you with even more than what you had originally envisioned, or whether it's because the devil just wants to interfere with your life and make other things fail. And that's the reality there. And so this was a project that it started out with a bunch of people partying in my Uber, and then had developed into this whole system, voice operated integrated systems, voice, that was much more comprehensive and useful, because it could do simple things like more accurately track your miles, because the current mileage tracker apps are all insufficient. it had numerous purposes and applications, and the drivers all need to track their mileage properly, but none of the mileage tracking apps work right, especially if you're running multiple businesses, and most rideshare drivers do operate multiple businesses. And so through voice commands, I could always tell the phone what app I was operating at any given time. Then I could compare my Lyft miles with my Uber miles, and I could also track things that the apps themselves don't track. They don't track all of the mileage that I'm doing while I'm strategically locating myself to the next spot, and none of that stuff is tax deductible. So by doing these voice commands and having a better mileage tracking app, I would have been able to. So this was what the Voice Rider was for, voicerider.com. I would have been able to increase the number of declarable miles on the car. You get 65 cents a mile as a tax deduction. Right now, that price may go up by the time you hear this, but that's a lot more actually than I spend when I'm driving around. One of the benefits of doing it is that it's almost the equivalent of being paid under the table, but it's legal, okay? And so for those who are like on disability that do Uber and other rideshare or maybe deliveries and such part-time, which is very typical to do it part-time, and very typical to run multiple apps. I might do DoorDash, Lyft, Uber all at the same time, Grubhub, all these things. And I want to know where my mileage is coming for each of these business operations, for not just to report it to the IRS. Who knows that I might not be able to afford an accountant who might want to do all of my taxes properly for me. And then how about integrating all of this with my TurboTax or whatever tax program I had? TurboTax actually has its own mileage tracker, and but it's insufficient, because in reality, when you're driving a car, you don't have time to go fiddle with your mileage tracker app to say this is what this mileage is for. At the end of the day, you're going to come home, you're going to have about 100 rides that you gave for the day, 50 rides. That means 50 times you have to go and categorize each trip. But by the end of the day, you don't know what those trips were for. And so you wind up guessing as you're trying to categorize your mileage throughout the day. Some of it may be personal. You need to separate that. And you don't want to report on your Schedule C for Lyft the same thing that you had already reported on Uber, because that's illegal to do that. It's inaccurate. And so this would solve those problems. Okay? And it can be solved safely through voice commands. That's why you needed Voice Rider. So all these ideas, they were good ideas as an entrepreneur, but the question came up, should I keep paying to keep this intellectual property going? And I didn't know the answer to that question. I have limited time to do what I have to do, that I know that I have to do, and these can stay on the shelf, but it's taking money out of my bank account in the meantime. So, you know the story of Gideon, how he put out a fleece to determine whether God really was telling him, should I go and raise up an army and fight? So now we're going by the noisy morning machine again. Kind of safe. Sorry about that. And so I put out a fleece, and I'll tell you what I did. I received a flyer in the mail for you could get a new car, and I supposedly had won something, right? Because you always get those. And it's like, oh yeah, this is from a car dealership, and they want to sell me a car. So they want me to come in there under the premise that I've won something. Then they'll know that they got a sucker to come in who thinks he's going to get a prize. And it's telling me that I've won $2,500, but really, we all know that there's a catch. So I went there anyway, because that was my fleece on the one hand. I said, if I really have won this money, which would take a miracle, then I'll keep the domain names. And in fact, I'll use the $2,500 that they claim that I've won, and I will use that to buy the domain names. And then no problem. But if I fail, and the odds are, you do a little research on these things and you find this out. If I fail, then the odds of me failing are tremendous. Then we'll do this. So I'll go ahead and not do it. I'll give it up. So odds are that I was going to give the idea up, even though it was telling me that I was not going to have to give up the idea, because that's the way of the world. So that's what I did, and I went down there with a friend who needed a car, and I was actually doing some research for him at this time, and I won $5, not $2,500, and I gave him the gift card that they gave me, and he used it and bought himself a shirt. Good for him. We went to the Walmart, bought him a shirt. And in the meantime, I had an answer to something that could have cost me a lot of money, which ultimately may have been worth $2,500 in savings. The problem is that I don't put it past the Lord to make the whole thing still work as one of the projects of the Pamalogy Society. So, sorry to make this all long. Had a little interference, but I want to make sure that I was explaining the exact situation. So, in other words, the Pamalogy Society is going to consider new ideas that come in from anyone, but I had a set of my own ideas that I wanted to run through it and see if I could get those approved. And since I was going to be on the board of directors, my own ideas might have a chance to take life. And trust me, I have a number of other ideas that are certainly as good and as these, or better, that I want to be able to implement before I die. And that's a lot of stuff. And so, but by giving this up, it's sort of easy in a way, because not only does it not cost me money, it will take no further time of mine, and I can focus more on the stuff that remains. There's maybe 20 other projects, but there's a few that are, and there's an order of them. They're one at a time. There's nothing about doing everything at once in a scattered way. I plan to live to 120 at least in order to make all these visions. That's why I take these walks, and I'm a little disturbed that I had that heart attack. I had to strengthen my heart these days, and so I'm paying very close attention to my health. One of the domain names that I own, by the way, is something called Cro-Magnon Diet. I own that. It's the .diet domain name. It's particularly expensive to maintain a .diet domain name, but it's highly advantageous to own that. And I don't have it for sale. And the reason I don't is because I have a simple idea for it, which is to have nutritionists come and help me sort out all the BS that we see in these advertisements and figure out what really is going to work for people to lose the belly fat that I've got that is causing me enzymes in my liver and may have contributed to the heart attack. So to solve that problem and bring health to people without trying to make a big profit on it, and yet not supporting big pharma and big food in the process, or anyone's particular commercial interest, but to actually sort all of this out. So there would be a book ultimately that would get written there. I don't know that there would ever be any products created, although it would be nice to have a few products that did it all, rather than 10 different fad diets all competing for our interest, as they all sell their milkshakes and vitamins at exceedingly high prices that are well beyond their real costs. So to bring health to the people would be an example of a positive social impact that you could have with an idea. And if it was run through a nonprofit, I think it might be a lot more effective. But the problem is these NGOs and other things tend to be corrupt. So it had to have measures to make sure that no special interest kicked in to lie to the people and mislead anyone. So that would actually solve the whole problem of being overweight and being in poor health. And that's the goal. So I'm interested in real solutions and truly doing good in the world. The whole philosophy of maximizing awesomeness centers around the question of, given my capabilities, the time that I have available, my resources, what can I do that's going to accomplish the most good? This is a question for everybody to ask, not just me. But it does fit into why it was that I wanted to do a fleece, because I'm trying to maximize my own awesomeness in building the Pamalogy Society. And I hope that you can see that the Pamalogy Society, if it was successful and if it gets executed, will help in innumerable ways. Because we would, if you were to take, think of in terms of macroeconomics for a second. If you were to take entrepreneurs and just measure this, think of the successful entrepreneurs that there have been, and they all contribute to the economy. And when the economy thrives, so does money that goes to nonprofit organizations to help people that are in need, that are unable to successfully have their money or have bad luck or whatever, for whatever reason. All the problems that get solved through nonprofits is really hard to measure. But it's big, it's huge. But it would be a lot huger if something like the Pamalogy Society existed, taking not just the successful money from the successful entrepreneurs and distributing it in the form of all the wonderful things the government does when it collects their taxes, but also all of the wonderful things that nonprofits do when tax deductions are made by those people as they give to charity. Multiply the number of successful entrepreneurs by 1,000 or by 10,000, and now that's a way to prosper ourselves out of the accumulated deficit that we currently have. And so in terms of macroeconomics, we could do so much more good if there were 1,000 more philanthropists in the world, or 1,000 times as many. I don't mean 1,000 more, excuse me. You have to understand the gravity of why it is that the Pamalogy Society would have such a great impact. And not only would it have an impact on an annual basis as our own economy was beginning to thrive, but it would also have a long-lasting legacy, because my goal is to leave this to other people to maintain after I die. And so that's the goal, to have this philosophy communicated and implemented, and that it would reach as many people as possible once it gets implemented, so that it can reach as many philanthropists that currently exist as possible, who would determine which programs they wanted to sow into, and then some of the professionals that might benefit as well, ultimately by giving in order to get. But so they, it's perfectly okay for them to want something back. We all get something back for all of the things that we do. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, isn't there? But in this case, it may be that for every action, there's a multiplying reaction of goodness that results. So that's what I wanted to share with you why I had put out the fleece, what the nature of it was, to inform you that they have about 3 days if you want to buy these domain names, to go ahead and buy them. I'm offering them up, all of them, for $500 is all, which is half of what I've paid for them through the years. If you want to offer more, you are welcome to pay more than that. Okay, but otherwise, they're going to go up for auction once they expire, and they're about to expire. And once they go up for auction, a professional domain name auctioneer is going to pick them up. And when they do, trust me, they're going to be selling them for tens of thousands of dollars a piece, because that's what they do. They pick them up for next to nothing. They invest in it. They have their own market to resell their domain names to, and they'll hold on to them until they do. I have a domain name that I let expire a long time ago. It was ghostsurfers.com. Ghosts. I also owned ghostsurfer.com, singular. And they were trying to sell it back to me when I restarted the company. I tried to restart that back in year 2011, I think, 2008. And that was before Facebook existed. We'll talk about ghostsurfers.com. You can go to that website, by the way, and it will tell you that story. And that happens to be one of the projects that I'm still retaining, because I very much had a clear message about that vision. It was from the Lord. The problem is that it was for later rather than for right then. And I kept getting ahead of myself. So back in 2008, I thought the time is ripe to take this to the next stage, because in that year, mobile phones started reaching the popular market. So I was thinking in my own mind, not having put out a fleece, to do this, and then my own personal folly in trying to get that restarted turned out to be useful, because if I hadn't thought that it could be done then I wouldn't have laid out a lot of the schematics and the type of things that went into what ultimately I want to see take place. And neither would I have had a good record of the fact that these ideas were put out there back then. So do go to ghostsurfers.com. That's ghost as in Holy Ghost, surfers with an S.com, and read the whole story. It's a long story. And this video is already an hour long, and I don't want to go through it. So to the point now, this is a for later thing. And sometimes God gives us ideas that are for later. And ghostsurfers.com is one of the programs that could be supported. It would be a candidate program for the Pamalogy Society, just as is the Ragadana Project, just as is, or could be, any of this VOIS. If somebody wants to buy it and run with it, you're welcome to. So it may be that the reason I got no on the fleece was so that I could produce this video and ask for interested people on that idea. And I want you to know one last thing. Got 1 minute left. I am not a frustrated entrepreneur. I'm a very content and very happy man. If I never succeeded in anything at all, which I don't think is going to happen, I really believe that the Lord is going to do all of these things. One thing I do know is I expect it to be His work rather than mine, and that in my weakness, there's going to be perfection. So even if I'm a confused man, and that's my only gift to offer, is my confusion, my not knowing a lot of things, even that'll be utilized. So when I was naive enough to get the Ghost machine restarted in 2008, only to have it fail and to give up on it in 2013, it was worth it was worth it because it put that vision fresh back in my mind, and it's still there. And I still want it to be executed. And so that's folly. All right, bye-bye. Love you.